Thomas, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And so usually we start with, what was your path in higher ed and move on from there. But maybe a fun question to start. So I'll kind of reverse that. I just mentioned that you were on the planning committee for the annual conference in Portland, but you literally landed and rolled right into conference time. What were you doing prior to the Portland?
Yeah, right before we jumped into annual conference, I was on my 2-year anniversary honeymoon. We got married, my husband Robert and I, in October 2020. And so we really just rolled out our celebration as long as we could. So we did a small private service with just the in-laws in October of 2020. And then on our 1-year anniversary, we did a small reception that kind of was meant to be the makeup for the wedding. And then because of COVID, we also had to delay our honeymoon. So on our 2-year anniversary, we went to London for a week and saw and did a million things. And then for 4 days, we went up to Newcastle upon Tyne and we stayed in a castle and played Dungeons and Dragons for 4 days. It was a blast. We had such a good time. Yeah, and then we flew home and I checked in on Friday, and then we ran a conference for for time after that. Here we are.
Yeah, but that Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, doing that in a castle, I mean, how cool is that? And then, any jet lag coming back and then going into the conference?
Yeah, we stayed at Lumley Castle in Newcastle. It's been renovated into a hotel, and yeah, it was all inclusive aside from the alcohol. But you pay for what you have to. And yeah, jet lag. It was I think like an 8-hour difference, and so we got in like at 4 on a Friday, and it felt like 2 in the morning. It was not a good time. But the mornings were great. It felt like taking a nap and getting up and kind of jumping into the day, and then you get to like 2, 3 in the afternoon, and it just kind of goes down from there. But yeah, it was fine.
Yeah. Well, I'll say you hit it well. I thought you were just energetic the whole time, so you played it off in the afternoons. But we'll come full circle with Portland. So let's talk about your background. How did kid Thomas get to the College of Pharmacy at Oregon State University?
Yeah, I didn't intend to really jump into higher education. I was born and raised in Ontario, Canada. We moved to Nebraska when I was 13. And I went to high school in Nebraska and then did my undergrad at the University of Nebraska Lincoln in secondary language arts education, so 7 through 12. And then I jumped into working as a teacher and as you mentioned, as a speech coach at Lincoln Northeast High School in Lincoln, Nebraska. Clever name. And I didn't intend to go into higher education. I wanted to teach, Shakespeare and oral comm, basically until I retired. But I had a student in one of my oral comm classes, my second year teaching. He went by Mo. He was a refugee from Iran, and he came up to me after class one day and said that he wanted assistance with an application to work part-time at a library for language acquisition, basically. And so I met with him during both my planned periods for like the next 3 days, filling out the application, helping him revise his cover letter and his resume. And after that, I was like, oh no, I think I want to advise students full time. And so I applied for an online master's program through the University of Nebraska Kearney. And their program kind of focuses on counseling technique and is housed out of their psych department. And so I worked full time and coached full time and completed my master's while I was teaching. And then, yeah, we moved to Oregon. My husband got a job at Linfield University in housing. So I was like, I guess I'll do my internship at Linfield because I live there now. And I taught half-time while I interned, and then that led to a position in higher ed. And then that fall, I joined Nakata. So that's what happened. And I transitioned into my role at OSU in January. And so, yeah, it's interesting being an advisor for something that has to do with the hard sciences, where my background is Shakespeare, basically.
But you make it work.
Yeah, that's great.
So you're fairly new at OSU, and then just jumping right in doing this. And we've had previous podcast guests, so Nicole Kent and Carrie Kincannon, who are also on the planning committee, and both from OSU. And I think it's always interesting hearing how everyone describes their institution. So, like, how would you describe Oregon State?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, I've only been here since January, but I think I'm pretty lucky in the sense that even though Oregon State's a pretty large public institution, the College of Pharmacy is like the tiniest sliver of that kind of bigger system. I only advise. We have caps on our cohort, and it's only like 90 students. So at most, I'll ever have 180 students that I advise. But in total, I think we have around 400-ish students in the college, and so I'd say we have the opportunity to be really do a lot of stuff in-house and be really innovative with how we do advising and things like that. But as far as Oregon State as a whole, I think they're pretty receptive and willing to try a bunch of different things and see what works. We have a brand new president that started this fall term, and I'm really excited to see what she does. I feel like a lot of people kind of describe their institution as this like archaic, bureaucratic system that, doesn't work for the people kind of thing. And I don't necessarily feel that way at Oregon State, which is, I think, really refreshing.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to put it. Because you've done the teaching, do you think that's something you may include at some point as well, and do advising and maybe teach classes at some point?
Yeah, I'm currently I'm sitting in this year because I had a honeymoon, which made it impossible to actually help out this fall term with this class. But we have a professional development course that we teach at Oregon State for our first year pharmacy students, and so I'm helping out with those classes, and we're hoping to add like a professional communication course. One of the courses that I taught most often in high school was oral comm, so just kind of tips and tools for interviews and patient care and how to approach counseling patients and things like that on medication and stuff. So not necessarily something I'm an expert in, but the communication side I'm happy to help with. So yeah, I'm excited to be doing that.
Yeah, and how would you describe your role as a student success and engagement academic advisor? What does that all entail?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different from maybe what would be considered traditional advising, at least from an academic side. My caseload is a lot smaller, but we're also very structured in what we do within the coursework. And so students only get 3 elective choices in their whole 4 years in our program. So they have a list that they pick and choose from, and they pick their term that they want to take that elective. So I'm not prescribing or helping or brainstorming or sending out codes for students to register for classes. So we get to spend a lot of time doing professional development advising. Mm-hmm. So for the first year students, we do a lot of strengths finders and strength building, these Clifton strengths for kind of assessing that. And during what we call like 0-week advising, so right after orientation, we split up the cohort amongst the student success team. And we have the students take a 4 tendencies quiz, which has to do with expectations. And so we get to meet the students and kind of do a first step of, how do you approach expectations going into fall term? How does that apply outside of school too? And kind of provide some resources preemptively before they kind of jump into everything. And then, as a P2, we do kind of goal-specific advising appointments is what I'm doing right now with our P2 students. And it's not so much of the what do I need to take as much of it is how do I be a good pharmacist kind of thing.
Now, when you say P2, like what is that
Yeah.
defined as?
P2s or P and then a number after it is professional student year, and then the number is what year they are. So a P1 is a first year student and onward.
Okay. And like with your program, like is it cohort based or is it kind of they kind of work it around their schedule?
Oh, it's cohorted full time. Completely. Students have the opportunity to flex for 1 year, but it's kind of structured within 4 years. So we have them, the cycle basically starts in the summer, and our priority deadline has passed now. November 1st was our priority deadline, but we take students all the way up through June of next year for the following cohort, and we interview like 100 and maybe more than 100 students, and then send out acceptance, and we only take 90. But we're not filling all 90 slots right now, right? But yeah.
Yeah. And I guess for those that might be interested, like so these students that are applying, what's part of the application process for them?
Yeah, we use a holistic process at OSU. So they fill out their application in what's referred to as PharmCAS, and CAS is the system that kind of does a lot of hard sciences, so nursing CAS and et cetera. But they fill out that, and then they apply to the schools that they're most interested in. They have to compile their GPAs and transcripts, and they have to get letters of recommendation for each school that they apply to, and then we assess their applications based on essays that they write within PharmCAS, and I'm also on the admissions committee, so I get to evaluate all of their files, which is a blast. But grades is only one small aspect. They can we assess their writing, and we assess their story and their background and interest in pharmacy, and their volunteer and pharmacy experience or research or medical field experience. And from there, we determine whether or not they're a good candidate to interview, and then their interviews are kind of done threefold. So they meet with 4 different faculty members that ask them different scenario-based questions about what a competent pharmacist might do to approach a certain situation. And then our student ambassadors do a Q&A session with them to kind of talk about the school. And then they also do a group activity with other applicants with another set of student ambassadors to kind of talk about how they would approach a certain situation. And then we meet afterward, and if they're an auto admit, they met a GPA requirement and got good interview scores, and then we're say, please come here. And then any students that maybe struggled in interviews or maybe doesn't have the GPA requirement, we meet and vote on whom we accept kind of from there.
So yeah, definitely, like you just said at the beginning, like very holistic in how you're looking at it and accepting students. Now, let's say like you have like let's say an undergrad advisor, they're meeting with the student, and that student mentions that they're interested in pharmacy. Mm-hmm. Like any advice to that advisor of how to assist that student, with questions or how to navigate them to the proper person?
Yeah. My biggest recommendation is that we, at least with the College of Science here at OSU, we have a good connection and thread with our recruitment and retention coordinator with that school, and we also have experiential staff that are actually pharmacists that work for the College of Pharmacy and are with OSU, basically, that go into kind of those introductory science courses to talk about what pharmacy is and things like that. We have an early assurance program at OSU that isn't just exclusive to OSU. It can kind of be on a broader scale. And you get connected, and if you kind of follow and meet the requirements of the early assurance program, you basically get an interview spot, which is a pretty exciting aspect. And we have pre-pharmacy clubs and things like that on campus to connect people. And so if a student's meeting with their advisor and they're interested in pharmacy, biohealth sciences is kind of the feeder major into pharmacy school. And so a lot of those advisors kind of have that in back of house ready to be like, oh, you might be interested in pharmacy.
Nice. Yeah. And so let's transition to more of you in terms of outside of OSU. We were talking about the Portland conference, and then in your bio it talks about other things that you've been part of with NACADA. So can you talk more about your NACADA experience?
Yeah, it's been really a warm welcome for being kind of a newbie. I haven't quite reached three years yet as an advisor, at least professionally. But I really wanted to get involved. I started my first day of advising professionally was, I think, mid-April of 2020. So just after the 2-week pause. And yeah, I didn't, aside from the people that I worked with, I didn't have any professional relationships with other advisors. I didn't know what other people were doing at different institutions. Linfield is a small private liberal arts university. And so I didn't know what advising looked like on a bigger scale or in different, what we would call units within different colleges at public institutions. But yeah, I also wanted to, I don't know, get connected with different programs and kind of low stakes things to get involved. And when I was a teacher, I loved being involved with the teaching associations that I was a part of as well. And I'm an extrovert, so I love people. I just needed to be around people.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you started, it was like right when the pandemic, hit, and then, I guess in a way kind of still considered a new to semi-seasoned advisor at this point. When we kind of look at the number of years that so far that you've been doing advising, although it seems like, part of it has been unofficial advising as well with some students too, like when you were a teacher. I mean, how have you seen like advising change, at least in the time that you've been in it from the start of the pandemic to now?
Oh boy. I think that the term that everyone loves to hate is hybrid, maybe. I think we went from exclusive online advising when I first started. To preface, at Linfield, I was also the online advisor. So almost all of my students met with me virtually because they weren't in McMinnville. They were everywhere else. So that wasn't too much of a shift for me. But in January, winter term 2022, when I started at OSU, was our first full term back in person, with an asterisk of, unless you have COVID, please don't come. But yeah, I think when I first met with I met with first year students in that winter term, probably in February. And yeah, the first like 20 students I met with, it was all virtual. And then we were allowed to kind of meet in our office, but distanced with masks on. And now since then, that's kind of transitioned to come into my office because my door is open and I'm available. But I give all of my students the opportunity to meet with me virtually. I actually have 6 appointments today, and 2 of them have been online, and the next 4 will be in person. So I think providing that flexibility is really important for students and for professionals. I have the opportunity to work for an institution that allows me to work from home when I choose to do so, so long as I'm available and I'm doing my work. And so
Yeah.
I think institutions that have really struggled with that flexibility for students and for professionals have probably seen more heartache and struggle than ones that are willing to kind of be like, yes, COVID happened, and now we have to adapt. And if we don't adapt, we'll lose students and staff.
And it seems like, at least with OSU, at least from your viewpoint of it, like it's adapted, and it's not saying let's go back to the way things were.
Right.
We've learned, we have lessons learned, and let's just continue on, and we're going to continue to adapt to different situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that has to be, quote unquote, the direction we go into. Flexibility and kind of pivoting at a moment's notice can be really daunting and hard. But I think in the long term, people are more appreciative of feeling listened to, and that we tried something to adapt to people's needs, and willing to try different things. So,
yeah. Now, from your bio, I'm very interested to know more about, so within Region 8 for NACADA, you're doing this learning partnership.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
So I work with Mike McLean at Athabasca University in Alberta, Canada. He's one of the Alberta liaisons. We both went through the Learning Partnership Program last academic year, and we were partnered together, I think in part because we were both online advisors. Athabasca is an online exclusive institution. And so we got to know each other and talk a lot about, how we've been approaching advising from kind of an online perspective, but still dealing with how COVID kind of impacts the students we've worked with. And we got to know each other pretty well, and talk a lot about hockey, which is important, as Canadians are. But when we both were elected as liaisons for this upcoming term, Shay, who was the region leader at the time, asked for people to get involved and kind of step up to do that. And we were the only 2 people who had done the program itself prior. And so we said we'd be willing to. And so now we have, I think it's 9 pairs that are kind of all over North America in Region 8 that we just finished last week, our last welcome meeting. And so now we just kind of send them off and hope that they meet at least kind of on a regular basis. And then we'll check with them in January to see how things are going, and do drop-in invites and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's really just kind of a low stakes way of, connecting and meeting with another person who is either in a different institution or situation, or has common goals or interests, and get to meet and connect and chat.
Well, it seems like something that's really cool, and hopefully it all works out. So best to both of you on this project, and hopefully, that a lot of people benefit from it, and then you continue it, and maybe it keeps growing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then part of the Oregon Academic Advising Association, you're also the VP. So talk about OAAA and what's your experience with that, and what's the VP position? What do you do for that?
Yeah, I got involved with OAAA shortly after I got involved with NACADA. They're a sister affiliated association with NACADA. And at the time, they were looking for people they were shifting up board members because terms had ended. And so I had nominated myself to be a communications coordinator for the 21-22 year. And I got it. And myself and another individual did the communications for a while. And then in February of this year, so right after starting my new position, the VP at the time had to step back. They had gotten a new role that was a little bit more demanding than they could do for OAAA. And so I took over that aspect, and the role mainly focused on coordinating the virtual conference that we had in July. And so basically doing the evaluations, co-chairing, and coordinating the programming. And so luckily I was already doing some eval stuff for the annual conference that just happened. And so I basically got to do a little bit of everyone's co-chairing just on a smaller scale. So it was a real enjoyable experience. And from the evaluations that I analyzed, it seemed like people got a lot out of it. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. And let's talk about that. I mean, because you're talking about you're doing a little bit of everything, like let's say at this conference, with OAAA, with NACADA for the planning committee.
Yeah.
But then also you also have to be an attendee as well, So talk about that experience, being able to actually navigate all that, balance all that. Because I think some people listening might be like, how's Thomas doing that? Like, I just get exhausted just being an attendee at a conference.
Yeah, I've been to conferences where as just an attendee, and oh my gosh, my screen just hates me today. Yeah, as far as being just an attendee, I think advice I'd provide is just focus on attending sessions that you want to attend or ones that you think would be most beneficial for you, but not going to every single session. I think people, in order to get their money's worth, focus on trying to go to every single session when really you might need time to reflect after a lot of significant sessions that you attend, and really do that internal work, trying to sort out what is it that really impacted my advising or myself as a person. And as far as being an attendee and also helping coordinate, I think it was structuring time in working the desk, but also structuring out time to actually look at the schedule and see exactly what I wanted to see. So I could go out, see what I wanted to see, and then pop back to the evaluations desk and do some running around and head counts and all of that. I like being busy and juggling a lot of stuff. I think I find a lot of value and fulfillment in doing those kinds of things. So that's what I recommend for someone who likes to do that kind of stuff. But you might need to, especially for the introverts out there, you might need to kind of pull back and find a nice quiet corner to just reflect after, a session or two. So, do what works for you.
Yeah, that would be me right there. So session-wise, like any sessions that you went to that you want to highlight or that you got the most out of?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I had to go back through to review everything. All of the sessions I went to were super great. I'll just highlight two of them, though. The first one that I went to that I really, really enjoyed was called Queering Advising: How to Apply Intersectionality and Queer Theory to Your Practice, which I didn't just read off of my screen either. I definitely memorized that. But it was so great to apply the theory from the Advising LGBTQ Students book that was published by NACADA recently. And I have it in my office, but haven't picked it up yet. And so they really kind of went through 2 chapters about kind of intersectionality theory and how that applies to beyond LGBTQIA plus students, because intersectionality kind of implies holistic advising and knowing your students on more than just a student level. And so they focused on 2 specific chapters and how that applies to the student experience. And I found a lot of value in that. And the other one was I went to your session that you co-presented, the Unlocking the Student Experience, Humanizing the Educational Environment of AAPI Students. And I just really loved the application of culture care theory. And I know that the background was specifically with nursing students, but I found a lot of value in that too, because I work with hard science students, and a significant number of my students are AAPI. And so I'll take any tips and tricks on how to support a major population of my students. And I loved how you intrinsically, how do I put this the best way? Extrinsically motivated your audience to participate, perhaps with prizes or coffee. And that's just a great teaching tool. I mean, I don't know how many times I had a bucket of candy and I'm throwing Tootsie Rolls at students being like, you participated, here's some extrinsic motivation. People love candy, why not?
Yeah, yeah, and that might be for the next time. Bring some candy, especially with long days at these conferences. You need that sugar, you need that energy.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Maria Domingo, who led that session and was the one who found that cultural care theory and was like, "Hey, we could use this, incorporate it in." I'm like, "All right, I'm here for the ride. Let's do it."
So great.
Yeah, and then I think people listening, you have, especially like me as an introvert, like when I started in advising and was a NACADA member, I was one of like, let me kind of step back, get the lay of the land, see what's going on. And for you, like it was like jumped right in, you know? So any advice that you might have, like from your experience so far, because you're doing things with OAAA, doing things with NACADA, you've been part of the annual conference, doing things within Region 8. So kind of like, I think from what you're saying, that as a conference attendee could relate to being, jumping into NACADA and professional development. Like you don't have to do everything.
No.
But from your experience, any advice that you have for anyone that's like, well, I want to get more involved?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved. I think there's a lot of low stakes way that, doesn't require you to like nominate yourself for something or ask someone to nominate you to do something. I mean, submit a proposal. The first thing I did to try to get involved with NACADA was our advising department, while I interned, put me in charge of submitting a proposal for presentation for the 2020 Region 8 conference, which I was not prepared for. We did not get accepted. But it was a great experience. And then that conference never happened. So it was almost like no one got their proposal accepted. So it made me feel less bad. But I mean, volunteering at conference just to do head counts for evaluations, which is so important. Or volunteering to read proposals. Everyone's always looking for people to read proposals. And just reading the email and checking to see. I think getting involved with advising communities is also great. We get 4. I'm part of the LGBTQIA plus advising community, which is super great. It sounds like we're really about to kind of springboard off into some really awesome things that I'm looking forward to. But another great way is to talk to your Oregon liaison, if you're in Oregon, or your region rep, and we'll find something. That's the one great thing about advising is if we don't have an answer for you, we'll connect you with someone who does have an answer. And so that's the best thing about that. If you ask a question, we'll find the answer, and it might not be the answer you wanted, but we'll get it, and you will get involved. So I think it's just the first step is admitting that you want to help. And if you do want to help, getting connected.
Yeah. And just like you were saying earlier about like emails, I mean, okay, so I know anyone listening, you probably get a ton of emails, especially if you're an Akata member, but
Oh, yeah.
look through those because sometimes they will put a whole bunch of different things in one email. And you just gotta, I know there's the news term of burying the lead, but read through everything because there's probably plenty of opportunities in there. And like you're kind of saying, some low stakes one where it's like, hey, I could just help out for a few hours and that could be some of my professional development right there. But other things that you might nominate yourself for or be nominated for. But yeah, always ask whether it's in an email, you find someone at a conference, and then yes, we will find something for you to do.
Oh,
Absolutely.
we will. Yeah. Passive and active involvement, I think, are both, hold value to people too. So if you don't want to be, a leader of something, that's totally fine. By you being there and interacting with sessions, or by attending conferences, or by going to webinars that we offer, or we do Region 8 talks, which are just kind of low stakes conversations about monthly topics. I mean, those are all ways that you're involving and kind of growing your profession and your identity as an advisor. And those are equally as valuable as, holding a position. Do what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then last question before we end and wrap up. How's it settling into the new home, and how's the cat and dog doing?
Oh, well, wouldn't you like to know? They love it. We like I was saying, my husband worked in housing for years. I had lived in an apartment. I was teaching and thriving. I met my husband, who was living at Doane University on campus in housing. And so when we moved in together, I had to move back into the dorms, basically. And we continued to live in the dorms for 4.5 years together. We were still living in the dorms when we got married, and we only just purchased our house in, end of January of this year. So yeah, we both transitioned out of our roles previously. We had our 1-year anniversary reception, transitioned into new positions, and then also bought a house at the same time. I guess I do all or nothing at one time. So wasn't stressful, highly recommend it, 10 out of 10. But yeah, we've been in the house and for a couple of months now, and it's been great to kind of, feels like Virginia Woolf, a room of one's own kind of thing. We're not surrounded by students, which we love. We love students. I just don't always want to live with them. I don't always want to hear them all the time. But we have a little backyard, and our dog Spud loves to play fetch, but he only plays fetch when we close the patio door. So we have to throw the frisbee while we're still inside, basically, and then close the door so he brings it back to us. We won't do it when we're outside, but so yeah, our cat is more of a roommate, so she just kind of follows us and doesn't pay rent, but that's okay.
Yeah,
we love her.
Yeah, it's a cat. They're so cute, So yeah. Let that slide.
Yeah, we're hoping maybe to host Thanksgiving this year at our house because we have a new table coming in. We, like I was saying earlier, we're nerds, and so we bought a gaming table that has it looks really formal and nice. It has slats on the top and beautiful leaves. And then you take the slats off, and it's got this inlay of felt, and you can play games and stuff in it. And we're really looking forward to that. Hopefully it gets here by Thanksgiving. We've been waiting years for it, but I don't know if it's going to come in. No promises.
Well, fingers crossed on that.
We'll see.
But on that note, we've ended this episode and this interview. But Thomas, thanks so much for being on the podcast and sharing your stories and just being part of this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for being an awesome human person.